Welcome back to the ACTFL Voices podcast. Glad to see you've here for another episode, the third episode. And we're going to talk with Meredith White, and she's going to discuss finding the right tech tool. Language teachers, are you ready? But here's a funny thing that happened during the podcast. We were discussing some things, and then all of a sudden, this happened.
Hello. Oh, it should just be, okay, is there an option to save after? Okay. And then let me see here. Let me see if you have a video. Oh, there it is. Look, I might see it. Oh, there it is. So I'm going to request access to it.
So yeah, that was really fun to see her in action and helping other colleagues. So it's ACTFL Voices. Meredith's work as a Spanish teacher has focused on proficiency-based teaching, comprehensible input, technology, and making learning Spanish fun. In 2023, she transitioned to an additional instructional technology support role to help more teachers in all content areas with their teaching and technology use. When not at school, she often presents at local, state, regional, and national conferences. She was the 2019 Peachtree Ridge High School Teacher of the Year, the 2020 Georgia World Language Teacher of the Year, and the 2024 SCOLT Founders Award recipient. Please welcome Meredith White. All right. It's the ACTFL Voices podcast. We're here with Meredith White, and the theme today is choosing the right tech tool in the language classroom. And we also have Christine Schreiber on the call. Say hi.
Hey, how's it going today? I'm excited.
I'm excited too. Meredith is a wonderful person and a fun person.
I keep hearing.
And an enjoyable
Don't
person.
believe everything you hear.
I doubt that. I doubt.
And this should be quite informative. And in today's topic, we really just want to dive into what can teachers use as far as tech? That might be a hard thing to think about when it comes to the language classroom. What's happening out there? But first, Meredith, I want to ask you, how did you get into language teaching, language learning? What brought you into this space?
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, of course. It's super exciting to chat about a topic that is broad and deep and interesting usually, but also everywhere, omnipresent in what we do day to day. I'm lucky. I grew up in a house and a family that valued words and language and having fun, and then had in 10th grade a phenomenal Spanish teacher that was life-changing. And it was about a week in that I realized, oh, this is what I want to do. I want to do what she's doing, and because she was just so with it. Now I look back and I think, gosh, she'd only been teaching several years so she was a very young teacher at the time, but so she was young and she was with it, and she was a native speaker. I should say I'm just saying at the time in the past tense, but she and I have remained close over the years, and that's 21 years ago, or excuse me, 25 years ago that we met. And so for a quarter century, she has quite literally every day, every time I use Spanish, that was her that first introduced me and made it fun. So she did the same things that my parents did, in which she was just delighted at any use of the language, no matter, and that's our job, right? Is to be a sympathetic listener. And so she wouldn't correct you in the moment. She was just pulling language out of you. And if you want to level up or not, it was very sort of not buzzword, I don't mean to use buzzwords, but
Open-ended.
She sort of, and differentiated kind of just our relationship helped too, so all those things that we know about just good teaching, but she just had it going on and actually just retired. And so, what an impact, because I know I'm not the only student that will forever say that was my favorite teacher. Her name is Marisol Padilla, and she lives in New Braunfels, Texas now. Mm-hmm.
Oh, just right down the road from me.
Yeah, just right down the road. She's great.
Yeah. That's so amazing.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your service. And I know you're retired now, but maybe you're still out there doing stuff. Most people.
Oh yeah, she's fabulous. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's awesome. So, Meredith, that is great. So what was the challenges you felt? You're a big tech person and you know all the new
Mhm.
gadgets and the whistles. What brought your interest into bridging these things? How did that turn about? What was some
Yeah.
success points with that?
Yeah, so I grew up with both parents working. My dad being a teacher in education, which was nice because we had the same schedule.
Hmm.
And then my mom was an accountant, so she had like was always on a computer kind of a thing. And this is, she became an accountant, I want to say like 85. So between 85 and she retired a couple of years ago, we always had a house computer. Remember when it lived in the kitchen,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it was like obviously pre-internet and then
Yeah.
eventually dial-up internet when I got in high school. And you could be monotasking at best. It was like doing one thing, and then if anybody had to use the phone, like that was
You
it.
couldn't do both.
Yeah, you can't do both. I say that for context because a lot of age groups, like older than we are and younger, don't have that experience. And
Right.
so that's been really helpful. We do this thing, I think, in technology where we say, oh, well, the young people just get it. No, they don't. My student
Right.
interns, I try to get them posting some stuff on social media, and it's like no shade to them because they're like 16, right? But they don't know how to make a TikTok. Then I show them
Mhm.
how to make an Instagram reel, and they're like, hold on, like the volume's kind of weird. And I'm going like, no, turn that volume off because you're going to do a music overlay or you're going to record your voice.
Wow.
And then they're like, oh, like they're consumers, expert level consumers, but
Mhm.
creators not as much necessarily. Like it's not a default
Hmm.
option just because they're young. And I think the same thing is for me. People won't. I think they think I'm must be the skincare, but they don't realize like I'm not 25 at work. They'll go, well, you're just so good with this, and I'm like, no, I
You had
grew
to
up
learn it.
before it. And I had to learn it. And I'm
Mhm.
just curious enough too that I'll click
Right.
around and find out, and I'm not worried about breaking it. I'm not worried about, because remember the whole thing was like, you could click something and get like a virus, like in the
Oh
90s.
my
I
Oh,
gosh.
yes.
100%
Yes.
crashed
I
a
still
computer.
panic. I
Yes.
still panic
So we were
today.
all traumatized by that because it was a real thing. And
Right.
I 100% killed a computer, maybe two, because remember, they were also super expensive. And so it
Right.
Yes.
wasn't just like going out and getting a really nice Chromebook for, a couple $100. There's like still some trauma that's carried in age groups and just also just if somebody's a novice in general. And people will go, well, these young teachers, they'll
Oh,
understand how
Right.
to use it. They don't. And it's become like sort of the quote unquote hill I'll die on is this concept of like being a digital native
Right.
because it's not a thing. Some of the most savvy people that I know are 70 plus. I think we kind of assume sometimes like things come naturally to people.
Right.
And I think there's some personality nature that factors into
yes.
it. I just don't know that we can make these like absolute statements of like, oh, well, they're young, so therefore X, or
Right.
they're over 40, so therefore Y. Because I'm like,
Correct.
well, then now I'm the exception. Like, but you just said, and I think a lot of the times, like, we use the word fluent in language. And again, what does technology savvy mean? I said we kind
Right.
of treat it like fluent, and it's like, what does that mean? Like that Jennifer Lawrence clip where she's like, but what do you mean?
Right.
It's like, what do you mean? So it's funny when people say that about technology, they're like, oh, you're just so savvy. I'm like, no, I'm just like impatient and I find a shortcut or a workaround or like I rig it up somehow because the thing we're trying to use isn't working and I'm just persistent. Like a lot of it's persistence. I fear that sometimes we're losing that in some of our students, especially since COVID. But when there's a technology tool that they're having to learn to do things in the language that they're having to learn, and then if the task they're going, why? What is this for? Who's the audience? Like, what do I care? I don't mean for that to sound harsh,
Mhm.
but a little bit.
Mhm.
That can be a lot. A lot of people, a lot
Yeah.
of times I would change my mind and go, you know what? We don't need to, this doesn't need to be a video project. We can do this some other way because this is a lot for some of them, even though they're quote unquote young
The
digital
young
natives,
generation.
that's again, not necessarily the case.
That's a
Yeah.
great point.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the same thing, finding that engagement when we were on that podcast. They were like, well, in her case, she was like, not everything works for every student, not everything works for every
Hmm.
year. It all
Yeah.
changes and is adapting to that.
Yeah.
And you're really honing on that focus of saying, hey, pull back if you need to.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because the focus is language in the end.
Used to be put the technology in the hands of the kid. They would say
Right.
back in like 2010, 2011, they would say technology in the hands of the student is the best use of that. And I think at the time it probably was. Well, the science is becoming clearer and clearer. And there are several researchers, the author of The Anxious Generation being one, Jonathan Haidt, who like repeatedly posts and writes about this stuff on a daily basis, where we are now realizing that was not our wisest move.
So let's talk tools. I'm so, like, you got me excited about this, and you
Yeah.
got some tools in mind and how they work with language. Would there be a difference in tools? Like, let's say if a kid is in the novice range, if a kid is in the
Mhm.
intermediate range, if a kid's in the advanced range, if they're there, hopefully, what would be a tool, let's say, for the novice range, and given
Mhm.
the instance of what you're trying to do with a student?
Sure. Well, when I think novice range too, I think heavy on the interpretive mode. I know a lot of times in departments, it can be like maybe Christine does a lot of reading and writing in her class, and then I get them in level 2 and they can't maybe speak much, but maybe I super focus on speaking, but then she gets them in the next level and they can't write worth a darn. You know, it's really easy
Yeah.
to like overemphasize a mode unintentionally or intentionally. So when I think novices, I definitely think interpretive mode focused things. So reading and listening. So like Ed Puzzle's a great one where you can have them watch something or read something, because you can just do it as text and then put the slides or something, make them into a video,
Okay.
and then that becomes the video with the questions embedded. But listening really is like Ed Puzzle, because with a video, it really is like Ed Puzzle's main thing with the video is the listening. So things like that, where you can figure out what you want to get them doing mostly, especially in the novice levels, build their confidence, lots of good reading, lots of good listening, and then speaking with a lot of structure. I love formative for that. It used to be called Go Formative. And I'm telling you, I always sound like I'm a secret formative agent and I'm getting paid on the side, but I promise I'm not.
Sponsored.
That right, sponsored, hashtag ad. This is like they listen to teacher feedback. They do a lot of professional development. They're super available. They're fantastic. And as a platform, you can embed audio. And when I say embed, I like link. You can link in audio that you already have from, let's say, Google Drive, just because it's a popular platform that a lot of schools have. We have both Microsoft and Google, which makes things a little confusing, but at least we have them. And so I'm like thankful for the tools, but it makes things really, really arduous sometimes. So you can take audio you already have, or that you record and upload into it, and you can put it all informative, and put some questions with it, put like, listen to this, and then almost AP style, put like a recording thing where they record themselves and respond to it. So it's that delayed interpersonal, super structured. Because novices especially, it's so easy for us as language people to go, okay, we just did a turn and talk and now you've introduced yourself. Now let's record ourselves having a full-on conversation. And they're like, conversation? Because the word conversation is a lot like the word paragraph. What does that mean? You might say it's 5 sentences. I might say it's 6 sentences. Ansley might have learned in 6th grade and been traumatized that it's always 7 sentences and this is the structure. You had a really scary teacher that was like, ugh. So what does that mean? Like paragraph? Well, same thing with conversation. A conversation could be, good morning, good morning.
Right.
And that's it, So I think we really have to first dive into what levels are we expecting them to do what modes at, like an upper level, more production, of course, and a higher level of interpretive mode. You should be able to like open the newspaper or like pull it up online or whatever and read something from the target language, country, or one of them, or community, wherever that is, and go like, I think I get most of the gist of like what's going on here.
Right.
Whereas a novice level, like, so that upper level, I would say now respond like you're hosting a podcast episode and you're responding to this, person who wrote this like letter to the editor or whatever. And so like you can change modes a little bit and your expectations a little more sophisticated. But with novices, it might be like, oh, okay. Like, do you agree? Yes or no? And maybe what they read was like, you like handpicked certain lines from it.
Right.
Or you use something like Gemini or ChatGPT and said, take this text. I'm obviously still going to like attribute the citation, but simplify this to a level, novice mid, or simplify this to all present tense, because, that's a time saver and basically creates like a custom version of that document, which some would argue is no longer authentic, but we got to do what we can, whatever. It's like, good grief. I know it's so hard, and I get both sides. I'm like, at the end of the day, my big ones are formative, because you can do every mode with every mode, like interacting in every way. So you can make a listening, they do some multiple choice, or they write a response, or they record a response. You can do any mode with any mode, like any question type with any response type. It's really killer.
It definitely starts like we were in the novice range, and you're like, well, you're figuring out what they can do, but you figure out what they can do in language, but also what they can do with tech.
Yeah.
You're doing 100%. A double can do.
Mm-hmm.
Really meeting them at the tech level and at the language level, and that should really encourage them to move forward. I like that.
Yeah. 100%. And those two platforms, Formative and Edpuzzle specifically, are so simple to use that students really don't get caught up in, where am I supposed to click? How am I logging in? What am I doing? They can really, it's like they get right in and they can begin the task. So I definitely think exposure to technology tools and looking at what our expectations are, like just the young people will understand and they'll figure it out, are not necessarily true. And I think something we definitely have to look at.
Yeah, we want to make absolutely. And we want to make this less scary for language teachers out there to get involved with tech.
Yeah. 100%.
It's an AI world, and it's going to become more AI. And it's not that we're joining forces, but we're going to join the push for this active learning. And this active learning of language versus looking at an app, and we want to get to the next level of nuance. Oh man! And then what do you say? Like, let's say we're in the intermediate range or advanced range, and like, ooh, we're gonna about to advance the tool here, or advance the concept. What would you pull out from there? What would be a tech tool? What would be a method you would use there in that range?
Yeah. Well, for sure. And I'm lucky that we have also language labs in our district. And a lot of people, they're the kind that like come down, there's Stevens brand, also hashtag not an ad. But we've used Stevens for years, and they come down from the ceiling. And so you get like headphones, and they have like a microphone. So they're kind of like a gaming, it's like 2-in-1. And they are really responsive in terms of like repairs and all the things. So we're lucky that it wasn't what many schools get, which is like 20 years ago, they install the thing, never to be heard from again. Like ours is an ongoing kind of contract and a relationship, which is really nice. And so some people will laugh at those and shrug those off. You can do some really innovative stuff with those, especially because of the fast pairing. So like for me, intermediate, that focus has got to be a lot on writing and a lot on speaking, because once they're you've filled the bucket, and now it's time to like pour it out a little bit and see what all was in there. And so the fast pairing, if you can get away like a language lab for them to be like listening and speaking and like responding, like interpersonal basically, but as fast as possible and as real time as possible, that is super, super powerful. Now, obviously, they can also, if you don't have a lab, they can just turn, and it's just me talking to Christine. But again, post-COVID, we're seeing their stamina is different. We're seeing that their persistence is different. We've all had the thing, if you've taught language where you walk away and then they start speaking English again, it was just because like you came near, they're like, here she comes. And you hear like, then the Spanish starts. Yeah. Oh,
that was me.
In German, I know. Darn it, Christine. But
Absolutely.
No, 100%. I mean, we've all done, it's like we do it in a faculty meeting too. The principal comes over, we're like, standards, like rigor.
Refocus.
It's like, what were we supposed to be doing? So it's just a nature, the nature of people, whatever. But in classes of, again, 35 plus, which is always my experience, I've never not. So it's like, that's one major factor is like, where do you teach? What are the facilities available? How many students at once? Because if you have like 20 kids, that's a great number to do some like pairing, some groups of 3. You can still monitor in a really active way and you're not running around like crazy. And they get to know each other in a different way than almost double that number. And so that can be really fun for interpersonal too. So I don't mean to like replace in-person interpersonal, but
Right.
the thing about being able to record it, the aspect that technology adds that I think is powerful is being able to record it. They hear it back, but you hear it back. So anything that you can do like with that, like Mote, MOTE, is a great extension for Chrome that works on student Chromebooks, and it works on like regular laptops and computers and all those. They can record on slides. So then Google Slides, like we mentioned before, they can record themselves presenting something. That's super cool. I think in the intermediate levels, they should definitely be doing that, where they've curated some slides, which is the easy part, right?
Right.
But then ChatGPT can't help you now, girl. I need you to like present that to the class. But if somebody's gone, or again, you are looking out at 36 to 40 kids and you're like, holy cow, I can't sit through 40 of these presentations. Yeah, like, I mean, I can, but we cannot. We're not going to like use instructional time for that. They can in Google Slides record themselves, and with the video on, like, not to be like, sorry to the students, but we're team teacher, right? And so you can also see if they're reading. At the intermediate level, really hard, because students stay at the intermediate level for a long time. And the intermediate level can take on so many different like appearances where, I always joke with people that it's like they become like bilingual, like goodbye, because suddenly in level 3, they're like, wait, how do you say the? And you're like, what? But it's because they have so much in there and they've taken in so much input that, they really do know, of course, more than they used to, but you start losing then these other things. And it's like intermediates really are a tough read, and it's tough to teach intermediates. And it's tough to teach intermediates if the other people on your team didn't have the same expectations. So, maybe they're like supposed to be at the intermediate level. Christine doesn't know the preterite yet. That doesn't matter. What can't she do with the preterite? Like, and getting those hard conversations, passé composé and all of that. Like, those are things that drive language teachers apart, like in their own relationships. Like, people don't talk in the same department for years because they both philosophically feel differently about those kind of things. And so it's like, if you can't, it's really hard to get on the same page. And if you can't agree on what they're expected to be able to do once they get to the next level, then it's also really hard to like plan together and then assess together, because we assess what we value, we grade what we value, we plan what we value. And so somebody might just be doing the heck out of some grammar, and somebody else might say,
doesn't care.
Well, I don't care what it's called. I just want to be able to use the, I always tell my students like the ibas and the abas, that's like used to. Those are the ibas and the abas, so like don't, it's like just so many different styles and experiences and cultural identity, like all these different things come into who we are as language educators. And I always think that affects the tools we choose, the things we do, the way we work with each other or don't. And so that can be really hard. So luckily, a lot of states have that defined like we do. Picking what you want to do and teach first rather than picking the technology tool first. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times that's what we do, because I've been guilty of it many times, is going, oh, cool, I want to try this thing, and not thinking about why. And turns out I didn't really need it. And, that can be frustrating too.
Actually, my mom was a teacher, and so she taught English and reading in the junior high levels, and she always pushed for AR. I don't know if y'all ever did AR, accelerated reading. Right. Always pushed for it, but other teachers did not like it. And that was just, like you said, like it wasn't necessarily a state registered or required thing, but that was just something so important to her. And like you said, like, and then the testing, it's just everybody has different ideas and whatnots, and if you're not willing to talk about it and figure it out, it's kind of hard to 100%. Go into that next level. Because if we wouldn't have had AR at the junior high level and I'd gone into high school and that was, oh my gosh, I would have been totally mind blown, wouldn't have any idea how to read the simplest
100%.
So.
The alignment's important.
It is.
Yeah, that's big.
And hard.
I mean, like this is a constant theme I hear about, is getting language teachers on the same page. A lot of times, when I grew up, it was world language teachers and then the English teacher. English teacher did nothing with the world language, and I'm like, well, there was no semblance. It was just two different worlds.
Absolutely separate.
Absolutely separate.
100%.
And then, in the case of like my daughter, when she was in French immersion, she's in Spanish now, but when she was in French immersion, and I might have said this before, none of the teachers connected, when she went from kindergarten to first grade, whole new life.
Wow. Yeah.
Second grade, whole new life. It was just a whole different teaching concept. They weren't bridging each other. They weren't talking to each other to know what was happening. It was almost sort of
Yeah.
weird. Luckily for me,
Disconnected.
because I was part of a pilot program and they were
Mm-hmm.
really pushing this 90-10 and learning French. Some of my teachers came with me. So I
Mm-hmm.
might have went from fourth to fifth grade. I had the same teacher,
Same teacher.
Right.
or the fifth
That's
to
nice.
sixth grade. But sometimes it would change, but there was a little bit of talking in between. And so like, and I'm seeing that a lot more with language proficiency versus fluency and getting teachers on the
Mhm.
same page. And sometimes do you feel that because of your ability to be tech savvy, do you find that sometimes with that knowledge, you're able to get both groups to talk together and come to some point a little bit like, hey, I know this tool,
Yeah.
this will make it easier for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you know which teacher is like, well, they didn't conjugate this correctly. And the other teacher's like, why did
Mm-hmm.
have you done that before?
You can just see them twitching too. They're like, it's not right, and it's like, I know, but let it go. The one thing that's sort of like technology, techie-ish is that I've used to kind of overcome some of those personal disagreements, but in a way that isn't obviously like, oh, that's how you do it, is just organizing some of those things. So
Mm,
making a folder that's like, okay, here's an example of unit one, and all the slides are in one place, in one
Beautiful.
presentation. Because before it was Unit one, week one, unit one, week two, unit one, week three.
Mm.
Well, now not only are all your dates wrong, but like they're
yeah.
all split up and I can't see what I did in week one while I'm in week two. And sometimes you forget and you're like, oh, geez, we already used this worksheet. So, like, why do I have instructions and a screenshot of the wrong document?
Right.
Kind of a thing. So, the little thing that we wanted to tweak, like one of our quarter, just 9-week goals, was to stop saying, like, you need to work on, or like the thing that was wrong
Mhm.
was, or whatever. We
Mm,
changed that wording to your next step is.
Oh,
And
that's
so
nice.
if they weren't understandable, it was little things like I said, so and the same thing with conjugating, right? Because you have those
Mhm.
super grammar
Oh,
people who
yes.
are like, and then the super woohoo, like people
You
who
got
drive the
it.
grammar people nuts and vice versa. So it was a nice way to bridge, like, you did such a good job describing your family. I loved hearing about like your sister that you said she was mean. Older sisters are always mean, right? You're just talking to kids. Like, you're just giving them feedback. They're kids,
right.
like you would always do your students. And it's like, your next step is, I want to make sure that we're using Tango and TNA correctly, because
Mhm.
sometimes you said Emily Tango. And like, I know what you're saying, but I think your next step is to make sure you're clear on which ones I have and which ones she has, because that
Mhm.
might be confusing for someone who doesn't know who Emily is and doesn't know that you're talking about somebody else.
Mhm.
And so little things that aren't like, you need to work on your conjugations, which is probably true. Don't
Yeah,
we all? But like,
absolutely.
just a different way of phrasing that. And what's nice about technology is there's a camera in there's practically a camera in the coffee pot. Like the new ones, I'm sure there is. We can record so many things any place and immediately put them somewhere. So we had like a folder of little samples like that, and making things accessible to the people who were cranky about trying them in the first place, or just
Mm,
tired. Like I said, it's not even
Yeah.
cranky if they're just like, girl, I'm not doing, like, I'm so
Yeah.
not motivated to do a new thing. It at least made it a little bit easier and a lot more accessible than like another meeting or trying to figure out what somebody was doing. Then you bring in those pieces like, oh, well, what rubric were you using? And suddenly now you're like, welcome, like,
Mhm.
welcome to my lair. And you can bring in those can do's, especially if they're like not comfortable with proficiency and they're not really getting it. And
Mhm.
you went to a session at ACTFL, but they never go. And so you're kind of slowly bringing those people up to speed with what now is what we're doing across the board in terms of like ACTFL and the state organizations and the
Mhm.
regionals, and all those messages are pretty much aligned now. And so
Which
it's
is
bringing
great.
those people up to speed without being too harsh. And I think the way that we present those with technology, or keep our notes, or keep our slides in one place, or our collaborative things. Because a lot of times people are just trying to find the file they need, and it's figuring out how can we keep all this together so that we can establish some goals, streamline them, and then hold each other accountable for them. And there are a lot of kind of technology-based ways to do that I don't think are always, super obvious.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. I mean, we need a camera in the donut box too. So let's.
Yeah.
Oh, no, then they would catch me.
Took the last one. So
It's
angry.
always me, Meredith.
Or who left the empty box? Okay,
That's
that's
right.
the question. Who
That's
left
really the
empty box?
question.
Okay.
Jeez.
Well, if you take the box, then they know.
Okay.
Then we know.
So, Meredith, what are the challenges with, let's say, protocols and dealing with what guidelines or factors of what can be implemented and how institutions feel about these programs, or what's safe? How does that work?
100%.
Did you know that ACTFL has a community page? Yes, you can connect and engage. There are online community groups, exclusive career resources. Find your team at community.actfl.org. There you can also find more about the language educator, the ACTFL Smart Brief, the ACTFL Store, and the foreign language annals. So, if you're a language teacher, hop on board. Again, community.actfl.org.
In terms of safety, I think that's another thing, if we're chalking it up to things like people we can blame. Guidelines are really clear for most districts. Independent schools can be a little bit different, and smaller districts can be a little bit different. But one thing that we try to really emphasize here in my district is blocked, approved, and paid for are all different, because a lot of people do that thing where they use the word Kleenex for all tissues.
Right.
And so anything if we don't pay for Edpuzzle, they'll go, well, Edpuzzle's blocked. And I'm like, blocked like you couldn't access it? It came up and it said error or whatever. And they're like, oh, well, no, I logged in. I have to pay. I'm like, well, then it's not blocked. It's also approved.
Different.
Yay. But it's not paid for. Or something will be not blocked, not approved, still load, and then kids get in and they can make accounts and all those kind of things. And so I think the first piece is figuring out what you want them doing with the technology. We have a request, like I said, a request process, and and they'll tell you exactly why. There's a couple of really big name brand vendors that we can't use. We see at conferences all the time.
Right.
And they're like, no, because they take all the information and they won't tell us if they do X and Y with it, and they won't not take this part, and then you see these big news stories where these district entire platforms are taken for literal ransom. And that's what happens, is all of these leaks and all of this stuff is out, and you're just making yourself vulnerable to that.
So how do you find that? What's the quick method to figure out if an app plans to use student data? What's the first thing? Is it in the contract? Is it where would you first look?
I would see. So when you create an account, and I would look at Christine, those terms and conditions. I would also, the first thing and the easiest thing is to see how students log on. Because if they have to create a logon, that's they just type in their email, or they can create a screen name. The safest is if they can create a screen name and put maybe their first name and last initial. But it's like that, where it's if they're just creating a screen name or something on a site like Conjuguemos, then it's not they're going in just fresh. It's not, impacting anything. And they kind of could put a different last name or just their last initial. Something like that can be really nice. But that single sign-on button for us is the biggest indicator of whether or not it's approved or not. And most of our stuff, even if it's approved, if it's not approved for Google single sign-on, that's what people get. It says authorization blocked. You need to check in with your tech team. And what that means is we've just not allowed them to use the Google button, but they can still manually type in their school email address. Now, one thing about that is that you have to check to see if the platform does is if they email students, our students are never going to receive that. So let's say they don't have to type in a screen name, but their screen name is their email address. And you say, okay, class A, listen, here's what we need to do. Type in your email address, make up your own password, We're not connecting it to your Google account, but that will essentially be your username. If they at any point forget their password, or like Edpuzzle or Formative or whomever needs to email them, it'll never go through because all of our email is blocked and it's internal only. So things like that, of like really knowing what your school or what your district like does, like how this stuff works. Because again, we have Microsoft and Google. So all of my Gmail emails forward to my Outlook. And so sometimes that can be confusing if people turned that on, because I'll never check the Gmail. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I'll get a share request and, you know, whatever. Right. But if people forget they linked those, that can be really nebulous to go, wait, is this my Outlook account or is this my Gmail account? And it's like, we have a little formula, look for the underscore, look for the period, you know, those kind of things. If how they're logging on is becoming more and more of a task, that's the more information they're probably taking. Got it. Yeah, and this is good. This is good to know. I know the listeners out there are going to really appreciate hearing that, understanding, because a lot of teachers are like, what are things I need to look out for? Well, look out for your student data. Look out for that single sign-on, and then look out for 100%. What licenses you are actually using and how many you can use and how many people can have access to it. This FERPA protected data that legally you're not supposed to, and it's like not only did you give the application the keys to your house, but then you gave somebody else the keys to everyone's house. And that can be dangerous. FERPA, what would that acronym stand for? Yeah. So that's the law. And now that I'm thinking, like, the Federal Education Right to Privacy Act, and it's the law that is like basically like the way you can't in college anymore post everyone's social security number next to their test results, like even in college, even as adults. Or you can't, like, if they ask for a recommendation, or like, let's say Christine's running for like public office or something, you know, she went to Texas A&M. Let's hear from the school. Did you know that They can't say things like, oh, she was a great student, 3.8. Like, they can't say any of that. So it's nice because it's for students, like, right to privacy, like HIPAA, but for school. Yeah. And so it's kind of that same thing. HIPAA. Yeah. 100%. So for our teachers, the point is we have to become educated about it. Even if you don't plan to use it much, you still need to be educated enough to protect yourself and to protect your students and to protect your constituents and your family. 100%. So last little fun portion we're going to try out here. I was at the convention last year, and I was just talking to different teachers, and this one teacher was just trying to figure out things. She's like, well, my school is this and that. So I'm going to play both snippets, and you can respond to whichever one. Here is the first one, and let me know if you can hear it.
So I'm a language educator. I've been in the classroom 19 years, and I've been a department chair for 15. And currently at my school, we are a department of 5 languages and 9 educators. And we do not all give all 4 of the language skills equal attention in our classrooms, and I'm struggling with ways to make all of the languages offer the students a similar amount of proficiency in each of the skills. And what do you do when you have teachers who lean very heavily on reading and writing and not so much on listening and speaking? What can you do to sort of incentivize teachers to give listening and speaking as much space and weight in the final grade, I guess, as all the other languages?
Okay, that's the first one. Here's the next.
I teach at a high school that has feeder schools. We have students from every zip code in our city and over 70 feeder schools. So the incoming students have a very, very wide range of proficiency levels in the languages. And across the 5 languages that we offer at our school, there doesn't seem to be any consistency with the expectations of what a student can do at the end of 180 days in their language classroom, right? We're actually on an AB schedule, so we only meet for 90, not 180 days. But at the end of all of that class time, shouldn't there be a standard set of skills that a student would have regardless of the language that they're taking? And if so, how do you get that alignment from level 1 to level 2? How do you get that progression aligned within a school that currently has no alignment whatsoever?
All right.
Definitely some overlap.
Talked about that earlier. Yeah.
Definitely some overlap. And so I've been in both of these situations. I also think kudos, like 19 years in and 15 years as department chair. That's a really young department chair. I was barely getting to school on time 4 years in. Nobody was making me department chair. I was really impressed by that. I was like, wow, good for you. Good for you. Like, this is like a clearly, obviously responsible person. And 5 languages a lot. So my former department was very similar to this, with a few more people. It was 5 languages, 14 people. And that is a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And it's not like quite the same kitchen. It's like all these kitchens connected and then everybody's a cook. And then if you're a singleton, like our German and Latin teachers were, then you've got freedom and flexibility, which other languages don't necessarily have. So the first things that come to mind too are those state guidelines that we mentioned earlier. And I can share with you for the information, like for the notes on this episode, I can share with you Georgia's, and they came from collaboration with NACESFL, the National Council on State Supervisors, and then also NADSFL with the district supervisors. So those state guidelines for us to align our department and with our department chair's vision was really key about 7 or 8 years ago when, yes, we got together and it was like, wait a minute, your quiz doesn't look like my quiz. Or maybe Christine and I agreed on this to give to Spanish 1. And then I went and I nodded and smiled in the meeting and then closed my door and edited the test, right? Because maybe I read hers and went, this is a little hard. Or she read mine and went, this is a little easy. So all of those same identity things, like we mentioned earlier, play into the professional relationships and the collegiality or lack thereof. It's easy to be congenial at school. Good morning. It's harder to be collegial. Look at those guidelines that are put out in many, many, many states and put out like with the can-do statements and all the other literature of like, what is the expectation at what level or like after how many years, quote unquote, block or otherwise of a language and like in what mode, because ours is laid out really beautifully. It's like languages are the rows, columns are the levels of like proficiency. And so it's like, okay, Spanish after, I'll give you an example, Spanish 1, after like a year of Spanish, their reading level should be novice high. Their speaking level should be, I believe it says novice mid. So like a lot of repetition. Tell me about what you like to eat. Me gusta queso, me gusta pizza, me gusta. I mean, there's a lot of repeating the same structures. And then their writing level will be novice high, hopefully, because when you're writing, you can take a little bit more time. And then we know intermediate low, like if they crack a little joke in their writing and then they give you a little ja, 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 it's like actually low key, that's kind of like intermediate low because you're inserting your personality. And the nice thing is at no place until I think like advanced mid, I might be wrong on that level, but at no place in the typical like 1 to 2 to 3 levels is grammar ever mentioned. It isn't until they say they can start to narrate in the past tense and it's like, or they can describe what happened to them or things like that. We all have to norm something at some point and try to reduce variability as best we can. But as a department with also 5 languages, we normed what kinds of grades we took and how much they were worth across all levels and all languages. So for a quarter, so you couldn't do what kids were doing, which was playing languages against each other, going, don't take German. All they do is take tests. Oh, take French. They only have food days and parties and they only play Gimkit. It's so much fun. Well, neither of those are true because they're children and children literally like don't have a fully formed brain yet. Like they lie sometimes. They are lying. The German teacher's delightful and they play tons of games. They just had Oktoberfest. Like you're literally across the hall from these people and you're like, I don't think these kids are telling the truth.
They're being so loud.
They're being so loud. They're laughing. I saw smiling. Like fun is had there. And so I think that was, and not I think, I know that was really helpful because what it looked like was whether it was Spanish 1, Chinese 1, French 1, German 1, Latin 1, or 2, 3, 4, didn't matter the language and it didn't matter the level. Everyone's grade book had the same amounts of the same kinds of things. We ended up following a 3-2-1 rule for the quarter, for the 9 weeks, which was for every unit, you had 3 little grades, 2 medium grades, 1 big grade. So that might have looked like Unit 1, the first 3 weeks of school, 3 classworks, 2 quizzes, 1 test. done. And then the next 3 weeks, 3 classworks, 2 quizzes, 1 test. So by those first 9 weeks, you had 9 classworks, 6 quizzes, 3 tests. That way the math worked out, and it was also not allowing students to like turn in this pile of work at the end of the 9 weeks and go, hey, I did all this.
Right.
You couldn't have. We only took 9 of these for a grade. And then you do that however you think is appropriate. So if it's they've got 20, they turn in their best 9, or you take an average of things across the week, or you do that. Like, it doesn't matter how you make that happen. But my department chair would come in and look and go, FYI, you only have 2 quizzes and the quarter ends tomorrow. Like, you have a quiz soon, right? And it's like, yes, I'm actually counting their quiz as their quiz and their test. Okay. Then from there, we would plan together and make sure that the quiz looked the same across the course teams. And then also not only Spanish 1, but like share what you're doing with French 1, German 1, Latin 1, Chinese 1.
To all my language teachers out there, it sounds like a very important piece of this is we should be norming all the time. And if you don't find that your institutions are norming across levels, then you most likely will have disparity. And to be able to norm will require someone being vulnerable enough to make the move. This is a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Meredith. Did you have any websites or anything that you wanted to list?
Yes. Yeah. So if you want anything like including contact information or, like I said, those Spanish 1 files or all the things, my website is meredithwhite.info. And everything's there. There'll be like 6 or 8 buttons that are really big, and they'll take you to wherever you need.
Oh, you would have a cool email, a cool little.
Oh yeah, .com was already taken. I had to do .info.
You went .info on us.
You had to pivot.
Christine, you have anything you wanted to close out with?
You know, I thought this was really interesting. It's kind of funny. I feel like we kind of kept going back to an overarching theme of like kind of figured out in a way of like, you know, and Ansley and I, we have that mentality, and we've experienced people who don't necessarily have that same mentality of like they ask the questions and whatnot. And I mean, it applies to everything. It applies to the students, the teachers that you're working with, and it applies to technology. It's a really important skill. And like you said, I think it's kind of getting pushed to the back burner as a skill of
100%.
So I really enjoyed meeting you and getting to know what you do, and everything you've had to say was really exciting and fun. So I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. Absolutely.
It's a good time.
This was awesome. And as I always say, I have nothing to add to that. You guys did a wonderful job, and I really appreciate you. And thank you so much. Thank you for listening to another episode. And as always, the future speaks through us. Until next time.